Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, we're going to continue talking about the Skellingrim campaign. Also, in trivial news, I bought a new CPU fan. I'm kind of happy about it, but also kind of not. I bought one of the liquid coolers because they're cool. They're not like necessarily better at cooling your computer. There's like mixed opinions on that, but they look cooler. Like I can't really see it in my computer. I don't know. I went to go look at like new things, and I thought like, oh, maybe I'll try a liquid cooling out. And I went and I picked up a fan that was better. I used to be using a mid-market air cooler, and then I picked up like a reasonably good liquid cooler, one of the the ones that come kind of like pre-built. It's nice and compact compared to the cooler that I was using. Which is funny because a lot of the liquid coolers, they come with like radiators and they're really bulky and everything like that. But this one is actually gets a little bit better performance for less space being taken up. The radiator actually attaches to the back of the case, so instead of being like in the way, it's kind of just up there on the back mounting. But the thing that I didn't realize about these water coolers is that some of them work better. Not really because they're specifically better, not because water is better, but because a lot of them come with much stronger fans. Like a lot of air coolers will think about the audibility of the fans that they package their coolers with. So like they'll run at like 1500 RPMs. And this fan, like I was looking at when I first booted on my computer, the reason why I did the replacement was because my old fan, one of the bearings was going out. And so when it would start up, it would make this awful noise, and then once it got going and it warmed up a little bit, it would kind of be fine. But it was just gradually getting noisier and noisier every single day as like the bearing just got worse and worse and worse. It's not like a problem that was just going to go away. But anyway, though, when I started this up, it was like so quiet. It was like I'd gotten used to the fan just being like loud, and this was kind of a problem for recording. Then it was like so quiet, and I was like, this is actually not too bad. But then as I left the computer on for a while, eventually the fan kicked in more, a little closer to like its full speed, and now it's like going at like 2,000 RPMs. This is apparently what this fan does. And so I kind of looked into it a little bit better. I should have done more research before I got into this. But apparently, yeah, when you get a fan that moves faster, like up into 2,000 RPMs, what that does is it makes your computer louder. And it turns out that air coolers actually could be way more efficient if they just embraced having louder fans. But just a lot of people don't really like having loud computers, so they don't do that. And, water coolers for whatever. I think that they got away with it, or they get away with it, because a lot of people who go to water coolers are people who are looking to get better performance, or who think they want better performance, and therefore don't care about the noise of the computer because, I've got a noisy computer, it should be noisy. I looked more into it, and it turns out that water cooling is totally viable, but the reason why it's so much better for people is not because of anything intrinsic to the cooling. It's not actually water cooling. I don't know. Well, it's a coolant, but the reason why it's good is because when people do it and they do it in a very advanced fashion, what they usually do is they have a particular setup in mind, and it's tailor fit to their computer. So the entire loop is it goes around, and it hits all the parts that are going to heat, and it's mindful of the size and placement of all of your hardware and everything like that. So those actual like cooling loops, they're effective, or more effective than cooling, because people design them very carefully to be more effective than air cooling, because they're distributing the cooling very efficiently. And of course, those systems all come with fans on their own, because you got to cool the water somehow. And how do you cool the water but with like a fan or something like that? So anyway, though, yeah, I got that. And, what can I say? I don't know. It looked cool. It looked cool when I bought it. So, yeah, I was kind of looking online, and it was funny. Like, there were a lot of people, and they were like, yeah, I still use one because, like, there are people with, like, glass cases and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, I refuse to use air coolers because, like, look. And then they have, like, this whole thing, like, all their tubes would be, like, lit up, and the tubes would be, like, different colors and things like that, like Christmas and stuff like that. So it's just sort of like, there's an aesthetic fun to the whole thing, but mine's in just the case. I can't see it. I do think it looks cooler, but I can't look at it. So anyway, that happened. That's trivial. Something not so trivial. We recently had PBN, or Norman Rangel, the guy who was doing the J cartoons, the guy who did Jim of the Romantic Journey, stuff like that. He stepped away from Down Somewhere. He's had some stuff come up, some financial things. He's going to be making a move. So unfortunately, he's not going to be able to work with us for at least a while. One of the guys said that he might be back at some point, but I believe that the good news is, like I don't know what his plan, because it'll be several months before he works with us again, if he gets a chance. And in that sort of situation, like, he's leaving us better than when he found us, so it would be great if he came back to work with us again. But you never know. We'll just have to see how things turn out over the long run. But yeah, the good news is though is that one of the reasons why he's leaving is because Mystery Ben is coming out with another video, and they're really pouring on the coals for this, so he's just got a ton of work to do. There's going to be a lot of stuff to do, so at the very least, on the bright side, you guys can look forward, if any of you guys are fans of Mystery Skulls, and if you're not, you should go check it out, because their stuff is pretty great, and their music videos are awesome. Mystery Ben is the channel. Their next video that's going to come out is going to have a lot of pizzazz, lots of special effects, lots of cool stuff. There's like, I think he was saying there's like 9 special effects scenes or something like that. So from the sounds of it, what he's done is he's shut himself off to the world. I think he's closed the windows, shut the doors, and he's just working on animation for the next like 3 months or something like that. So yeah, I shouldn't have given the time. They're probably gonna shoot over schedule. Every project always goes over schedule. This is why I say I have no idea what's gonna happen. It could be like much longer than X number of months before you could ever count on a schedule. But that's unfortunate. But that happened. We've discussed things with the team. We're gonna continue J Cartoons. Me and Copy are gonna start working a little bit more closely together on things, which is not bad, because Copy and I we're a lot closer in animation skill to each other, because we both kind of started learning at a similar time period, and because we're both working on Don Somewhere projects to get our experience. We're both learning at about a similar rate. So kind of an interesting thing there. So she and I are kind of it's unfortunate, like it used to be some of the best stuff that we have animated in our things was done by Norman, like the big rainbow thing at the end of the last Mass episode. That was Norman. Rarity being thrown through the wall, that was also Norman. So yeah, we won't be able to call on anyone with more experience than us to help with those kinds of things. But we'll make do, and we'll work within our limits. The nice thing about working with Copy is that, like I say, because she's pretty much at the same level as I am, I know exactly what I can say. Oh, here's something we could, like, here's what we can do, because I know what I can do, and so I know what she can do. So that's good. That'll be good as far as teamwork goes. So yes, that's the news. So role playing. So last we left, the group had just left the town of the Blue Wizard. They left in so much, and they went on their way to go and find this alternate dimension. And it turns out that this alternate dimension to this merchant was being guarded by a troll. Like, they got to where they were supposed to be, and they just find this like old broken like stone bridge with some ornamentation around it, and there's just this troll kind of hanging out on this bridge. And so they come up to this troll, and they're like, hey, like on our map, these are the coordinates, like this is where we're supposed to be. Like, is this a dimension? And like the troll, he just kind of like shrugs and he goes, I don't know. And they're like, well, what are you doing here, troll? And I think that what they first did is they didn't just like walk up to him because he was like a troll. I think that like they came up over the hill, and he was just kind of there on the hill, and he just kind of like puts his hands up, and when they waved at him, he waved back. So they were like, oh, well, maybe he's not gonna kill us. And so yeah, so they walked up to him, and they're like, so what are you doing here, troll? And he's like, well, I'm a troll, and this is my troll bridge. You have to pay the troll toll to get past. And so they were like, oh. And they just look over, and it's like what the bridge does is it just leads over like a sheer cliff, and then it's like just broken after that. So like they were like the ocean just kind of goes on above. So imagine like they're on this cliff, and like past the cliff is just the ocean, and here's just this troll kind of sitting here guarding this bridge that leads out into the ocean. And so they were like, oh, like, have you ever tried to cross that bridge, troll? And he was like, nope, not supposed to cross the bridge. I'm just supposed to guard it. I'm a troll. This is what I do. I take tolls for crossing the bridge. And what the party had at that time, because they leveled up at the end of Insomuch, was they had just gained the ability Send, I think is what it was. And D&D, frickin' D&D, this is one of these things where, like, I really dislike in D&D the way that when players level up, they just get a new list of powers. Like, if you're an experienced GM, you know what they're going to get, and you can plan for it. But me, who had never really, like, GM'd a D&D game before, like... We got, or at least certainly not the level 5. I think I might have done, like, if I've done D&D, it was always, like, level 1, level 2, and nobody ever got higher than that. But, like, all the way up to, like, level 5, level 6, you know, levels higher than that, I had never in my life. So like, somebody was just like, oh, well, like, Skellingrim is probably already back there, right? Like, let's just do sending on him. And, like, sending even has rules for, like, if someone is in another planar dimension and things like that, or message. I think it was message sending. Shoot, I can't remember what it was now. But yeah, they were just like, yeah, we could just totally like send a message to Skellingrim, and so they did. And they were just like, hey, Skellingrim, where are you? And he was like, oh, I'm in the other dimension, like past the bridge. And they were like, oh, well, how do we get in there? And they're like, well, you have to go past the troll. Like, just demonstrate to the troll that you're worthy to go past, and he should let you go. And they were like, oh, well, troll, we're worthy to go past. Like, how do we get in? And the troll was like, well, I mean, there's a couple of different ways. Like, you could persuade me, and I guess I would let you past. And so they were like, so they just called Skellingrim again, and they were like, hey, Skellingrim, come out here. And so Skellingrim, like, he just, like, walks out from the cliff, and he, like, walks onto the bridge, which was broken. And he goes, what's the problem? Like, he was there. He didn't know that they were coming, but, you know, thanks to the sending, like, the spell, oh, well, here they are. Which... You know, like, through a lot of... he was a wizard. I mean, like, Skellingrim had so much magic because he was, like, this high-powered super wizard. And me being a GM who doesn't know, like, D&D all that well, like, there is a whole chapter of spells. And I cannot be asked to read the entire chapter of spells. I will homebrew spells, for goodness sake. Like, oh my god. So I didn't know that Skellingrim could probably also do this same thing right back to the party at any time. Like, when you really think about it, in D&D, there's no reason for a high-level wizard to ever be in the dark on anything. And yet, on multiple occasions, Skellingrim was more or less bamboozled just by the fact that the group didn't tell him things. Like, I am not used to that in a game at all. And this whole, like, sending thing, this message thing, like, man, like, I had plans, like, a certain ways out, and it just, like, time and time again, it just kept being like, oh, the party is trapped, and they need help, and then they would just call someone who they knew, because throughout all of this, like, they'd met the Dragon King, they'd met Skellingrim, they'd met, like, Count Colaris, you know, they would ever have been someone, like, all these powerful and influential people, like, imagine if you could just send a message to them, like, imagine you could just tweet someone, like, suppose you could just tweet, like, I don't know, like, one of America's, like, top-ranking generals, and just tell them where you are and what you needed, you know, like, right there on the spot, and they were a friend of yours, and they had the resources to do whatever it was you needed, because they're so much more powerful than you. Like, D&D is like that, and, like, if you, like, a level 20 character, which is super rare, like, I mean, like, most of the creatures in the game, like, I knew that about D&D, I didn't have anyone... be level 20 unless they really were like gods among mortals. But man, there were a couple of them. Like, there was one who was like a god among mortals who I had gimped and hindered in a lot of ways so that the party could actually deal with him and not have him, you know, devour them with a single snap of his jaws. But yes, found out about that spell. So yeah, so Skellingrim just comes out and he's just like, what do you need, guys? Like, what do you need? And they're like, well, tell this troll, like, that we need to go into the dimension with you. And so Skellingrim was like, hey man, like, let them in. And the troll's like, no, can't do that. And he was like, but they're with me. And then the troll's like, no, you can't just do that. Like, he goes, I'm supposed to test their merits. It's the troll bridge. I have to take my troll toll. And so Skellingrim, he just kind of shrugs. And he's like, well, I don't know, tell him some great thing you did. And so, like, I think the group, like, they found out the troll's name was Oclap. I can't remember if they just talked to him if they found out about that casually, or if they were trying to cajole him into letting them through without, like, actually passing his test. Which wasn't really a very hard test. They're like, what exactly do you want us to tell to prove our merit? And then Oclap kind of shrugs, and he goes, like, my order, like, he goes, I was created specifically just to guard the bridge. Like, I don't know, like, I don't have that much in the way of instructions. Like, I spend a lot of time sitting out here thinking about things. Like, just tell me something interesting about yourself, and if that sounds like a good enough reason to go to the plane of mercantile, then sure. And so some of the group had no problem with this. The guys who had been play into character and had done all kinds of things. Some of them had like really exciting stories, and they were like, like Lyman had his story about like I climbed up all the way up the castle, and I fell back down on the other side, and I ran and I found my friends. And so he kind of had this like heroic sort of yarn to spin. And other guys were like, the escape. Like Count Colaris had provided a lot of stuff. Like there were other guys, they were like, when we rode the dragon, and like the goblins, we fought the goblin, and everybody kind of had a thing, except for a couple of characters. And one of them happened to be Thelos. And Thelos wasn't sure what kind of amazing thing she had done. So Thelos was like, gee, I don't know, I don't think I've done anything. And then everyone was like, but Thelos, you were there with us the entire time. We had so many epic adventures. Don't you know anything? And then Thelos was like, no, I don't think I really did anything that good. And so the party was like trying to think of a way to help Thelos like get over. And the trick was just like, they were like, what if we tell you Thelos' story for her? And Oclap was like, well, I mean, that's kind of against the rules. Like, she's got to have her own story. You can't just, I mean, like, how do you know what she was going through, what she was thinking in her head? And like, it wasn't like Oclap was being like really hard about it. He was just like, I don't know. I mean, like, I think if they'd rolled persuasion like hard enough, like maybe Oclap would have been like, oh yeah, I guess you guys could tell her story, that would be fine. But they were just kind of like, what do you think, Oclap? And Oclap was like, yeah. So they were just like, oh, you got to do it yourself, Thelos. You got to do it yourself. So what Thelos wound up doing was she's like, well, I don't think that I can like come up with a very good story, but I could probably cook like an okay potato stew. And so Oclap just like. This was, I think, where they took their persuasion rolls. Was they were like Oclap thinks about it, and he's like, he's like a heroic kind of potato stew. And then she was like, yeah, I mean, like, I'll do my best to make it heroic. And they were like, okay, I have persuasion. And so they got Oclap to agree, like, yeah, okay, potato stew, like, sure. So I think that they had to like dig through their rations, and it wasn't like initially potatoes. I think they were like, dig through our rations. What do we have? And they were like, we got some jerky and some potatoes and some things like that. And they were like, well, all right, we'll make a guardian pleasing stew out of these ingredients. So they sat down and they took some rolls for like the stew, and they made like a passable stew. It wasn't that amazing. But I think that what the party then did is they put on a performance, because in D&D what you can do is when you take your rolls, you can also get assistance, and when you get assistance, you get to roll 2 dice, and then you take the highest roll. So what the party wound up doing is they put on kind of a performance where they were like, oh, like the presentation, like this is the best stew I've ever had. Yeah, ooh, this is great. And they were like, what do you normally eat, Oclap? And he was like, well, I don't know, whatever runs up close enough to get in my mouth. Like, which is not a whole lot of things, mind you. I mean, like occasionally animals dumb enough will walk into my lap because I sit here so still. But, I usually just eat those raw. And they were like, oh, well, this is like the best stew I've ever had. Like, I mean, so like Oclap had no frame of reference. And they kind of like, talked him into being like, oh, it was the best stew ever. And so Oclap was like, well, I guess that was a pretty good stew. I mean, like, I don't think that I've had a better stew. So sure, yeah, okay. And so yeah, so through just like. Like I think that someone like they had a instrument. They might have even sung a song about the stew, like on the spot. I think somebody composed music about how good the stew was, and they were like, yeah, see, like they composed songs about this stew. Like that's something that people sing all over the place. Like, Oclap, you don't get around, right? You don't go to towns. You wouldn't hear whether or not that's true or not. And Oclap's like, no, I guess I wouldn't. So Thelos got in by cooking a potato stew, like a mediocre potato stew, which everyone then pretended was the best stew ever. And Oclap was content, believing that he had gotten the best stew in the world. And it's like, like, one day maybe someone else will do the same. The thing that was funny was that Oclap was there not really as a as a guardian, like he wasn't really there to test anyone all that badly. What he was there to do was he was essentially just the shop bouncer. He was there to keep the riffraff from like just like just mind yourselves, like beggars. It was to keep like beggars and other people out. Like you come up to this bridge, and if you knew that there was a dimension here, then you would know that there was like Oclap is there. You can't just go in. Like Oclap won't let you just go in. So that was kind of Oclap's thing. He wasn't really trying to keep people out, because the god of Mercantile actually did want people to come into his Interplanar store so he could sell you things. He just didn't want, like, undesirables coming in to be sold things. So that was kind of Oclap's thing. He was just like, oh, I mean, you seem fine. Like, you're not dirty, and you have money, right? Yeah, okay. So he let them all in, and it was kind of amicable, and, like, Oclap was he was a nice troll, and everyone treated him nicely, and he responded fairly nicely. I think once or twice... I think someone wanted to challenge Oclap instead of trying to justify their ability to go in, and I think that there was a little bit of what they call the GM warning, where it was like where they were like, okay, like I'm just gonna like chop Oclap's head off, and then Oclap was like, well, you do know I'm the guardian to like this god's dimension, right? And they're like, no matter, Oclap, I'm stronger than you, I'll defeat you. And I think that Oclap was like, yo, okay, and so he just like picks up this like really large boulder or something like that, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna smash you with this, is that all right? And then they were like, hang on. Like it was like one of those things. He was like, I'm like a supernaturally strong troll. Like whatever you know about trolls, forget it, because I'm empowered by God. I'm empowered by God. Like, I mean, I'll fight you if you want. I mean, like, I'm not gonna give it my all, but just be forewarned. Like, if I smash you with the rock, you're gonna be pretty smashed. So they were just like, oh, hang on. All right, let's go with the virtuous story route. I'll tell you my story instead. So Oclap wound up not fighting anybody. I don't recall. I don't think I had him like he didn't have like good armor or anything. I think he was just kind of like a fairly indestructible troll who was just very, very strong, and he would have made a half-minded effort. Like, I mean, this is kind of a riff-raffy thing to do, picking a fight, like if you're gonna get violent, maybe you shouldn't come in the store. There's fragile stuff in there. But anyway, though, so they finally got into the store, and like, they come in, and there's a little bell that jingles when they walk through this interplanar, like they go through, and it's like this trippy interplanar experience, and then as they arrive, they hear a little bell jingle, and this god, and I can't remember how I described him now because it's been a little while, but this god comes up, and he's got like a name tag on, and he's dressed rather nicely, and he just walks up, and the name says Servery. Servery is the god of Mercantile. He shines down upon all merchants, and blesses them if they are good merchants, and curses them if they are very poor merchants, if they have bad bookkeeping, or if they try to swindle people poorly. Like if they try to swindle people, but everyone figures them out too fast, curses upon them. You have to be a good merchant. If you're going to swindle people, do it well. Servery was not really he wasn't all that well prayed to, because he kind of, in a way, he was sort of like that free hand of the market. Like, I just come down on whatever, like whatever happens, I'll just do it. Like, yeah, sure, yeah, sort of. He wasn't really that gracious of a god. Not very many people prayed to him. But he did buy and sell souls and things like that, and he was actually quite wealthy in souls. Had a lot of souls. People all the time are like bargaining for souls. You get that sort of thing, and this is why a lot of gods will bargain for souls. Like you have all these people that come in and they're like, they're like, oh, I'll give you my soul. Like I'll sell my soul to the devil or whatever, this or that, and so they collect your soul, and then later on, when they need something from Servery's store, they come on down and they're like, oh, here, I've got some souls, and the souls are currency. You take the souls and you get stuff. So so Servery actually had quite a few servants. And then he used the souls to like give to other gods. Like, I'll give you a bunch of souls if you give me your thing. So souls were currency to the gods. Servery accepted souls. He also accepted money. He accepted bartering. He accepted any form of mercantile that you could think of. And what the group had was Skellingrim, Lord Archaeopteryx's anklet, and it was fully charged. And here they were at the end of their journey, so they handed this thing over to Servery, the god of Mercantile. And so he came back with a spear for Skellingrim, and this was apparently a thing that they had negotiated well ahead of time. Servery did not like Archaeopteryx. They had had some kind of disagreement way back earlier on, like a long, long time ago. And Servery just kind of hated Archaeopteryx and had decided that he was going to be frozen out of markets and things like that, and just he was always going to have bad luck whenever he tried to set up some kind of business. And so it was lucky that Lord Archaeopteryx ran a country and not a business, because if he had to run a business, he would have just always failed. Skellingrim got this spear. And because the game is over, I can explain to you guys what the spear was. It turned out that what the spear was, it was shaped sort of like a fountain pen, is the way that I explained it. And what this spear was, is it was a sort of spear that was powered by the primordial forces that formed the whole universe. And all this black stuff that the party kept running into, this sort of primordial thing that was forming into creatures or giving power to Archaeopteryx and all this stuff like that, it could actually be drawn up from the earth or from any kind of source into the spear, and then the spear served as a source of power. It was essentially like a weaponized form of Lord Archaeopteryx's anklet, although instead of powering a creature made from this primordial stuff in kind of that way, it would just empower whoever happened to own the spear, which in this case now was Skellingrim. Although he didn't exactly come forward and explain that to everybody, he just explained that what he told them. They were like, so what are you going to do with that spear? Like, what does it do? And he goes, this spear is strong enough to kill Lord Archaeopteryx, and that's what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to take this thing, and I'm going to stab my former boss, and then I'm going to take over the throne, and then Burgundy will rule the undead. And that's my plan. And they were like, oh, I see. And he was like, yes, that's the plan. So, yeah. So the party was they didn't know quite what to think about that. They all got rewards, though, from Servery. Like, Skellingrim left enough. The reward was worth enough that the party was just able to go around and ask for various things. Everybody asked for something fairly reasonable. We had one character who wanted to, like, rule the world or something like that, and it was like, oh, no, you don't have enough credit to rule the world, please. But they got other things, though. They got, like, one person asked for, like, splint mail, which is funny because in D&D, like, usually you're just vomiting money onto your players, like, uncontrollably, like, you can't stop, and then they buy, like, the highest rank armor, and then there's nothing left to do with the money. And by the level that the party was at, they really should have already been in the highest level armor. But, like, they hadn't been really paid that much, so the group was just like, yeah, a high level armor. That's what I want. And so he got them, like, a bunch of, like, splint mail or something like that, and they're like, yeah, splint mail, good, all right, cool. So that was the god's wish. Thelos wished to be male because Thelos believed that she was magically transformed, and so Servery said, yeah, that's like permanent transformations. Those are totally normal. So he just went and got a potion that made Thelos into a male. So Thelos became a man. Lyman got paperwork, and this was important a little bit later on, but Lyman got paperwork that proved that he was a citizen. Like, he was given citizenship and paperwork to prove it to every known nation in the world. And it wasn't actually like, it was kind of like a file folder that he just carried around, which he could open up and he could just flip to, like, no matter where he was or what he was doing, if it had a system that proved that you belonged, he could flip to that page and find, like, paperwork there for that and just hand it to the person. And this was actually pretty funny. This came up, like, numerous times and saved his butt on a couple of occasions and always confused various officials, because it was like he was a halfling, like a hobbit, and so you would just imagine him going up to, like, the city of the elves and just being like, oh yes, here's my paperwork that proves I am a citizen, and the elves are just like, what? Oh, okay, sure. So yeah, he got that, and then Franz got, like, a thing, like a crystal that increased his intelligence, and then CF, a guy who runs another campaign that we were doing, asked if he could have a character show up from his campaign setting and come and talk to one of the players. Because one of the players, they thought that I was ending the session right there. And so what they did is it was actually Franz. Franz decided that he was going to have his character transfer over to CF's game, and CF was cool with that. So we had a little thing where this guy came into, like, Servery's dimension to buy some things, including a magical tomato, and which I can't tell you guys about because I was asked to remain secret about the magic tomato. And so Servery gives this guy a tomato, and then Franz goes off with him to this other dimension. And that was kind of where we ended the session. And this, I believe, is where we need to end the video. It's only been about a half hour of recording, but I'm seeing that my battery is blinking on my camera, which means it might need to be replaced. Cameras are expensive. I don't really want to replace the camera. It's an old camera. I got this like way back, years ago. But anyway though, I suppose here's a good place to stop. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.